Welcome, Kim, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation to come along. It's always great to have sort of somebody else's view on things. Everybody's had a different level of experience, and the more people we hear from, the better it is. So, gentlemen, we have Mr. Kim Rhodes, who is the CEO of Austravel Safety Net. Did I get it right?
Oh yeah, that's one of the things. Yep.
And also, he's an amateur, VK6TQ, Quebec, correct?
Yeah, correct.
He's been kind enough to come along and talk to us about various subjects, and Bushcom is one, antennas is another, commercial HF radio, and tell us a little bit about what he does in the communications world. So I'll hand it over to Kim, and thank you very much again. It's really appreciated having you on board.
Okay, thanks, thanks Stuart for the invitation, of course, to come and do this. And that'll be my phone buzzing in the background. It can do that. And we're also, well, I've got to say, from my point of view, I'm learning Zoom, so we're going to struggle a bit with some of what we want to do. However, after talking to Stuart, I thought tonight that we'd probably have a chat about some of the different antennas that are around for use for multi-frequency use, either at home or in the car. And I know a lot of amateurs have got ideas on these and have got a number of different things around. But some of what I'll be talking about is where we're bringing some of the things from the commercial world into usage in the amateur radio world. All right, I'm just going to have a go at putting a slide up because, like I said, we're having a little learn here at the same time. So we'll see if I can get, I don't know if this, no, that's the wrong one. It's brought the wrong one up. I'll stop that. Anyway, look, from my own point of view, I am VK6TQ. I've been involved with electronics and communications for about 45 years. So I was an amateur at high school and subsequently worked in the communications and electronics industry, and was a manufacturer in electronics for quite a few years, and now I'm retired. As Stuart said, I've become involved with a club called Austravel Safety Net, which is a HF club in Australia, and we'll talk a little more about that as we move along. And my interest, of course, is still antennas and HF radio in general. So I'm well aware there's many more fields in amateur radio than just that, though. Excuse me, can't move away from the microphone because it's on my head. Tonight, my focus is going to be on multi-frequency antennas, or often called broadband antennas. Hang on a minute. I'm losing my voice, and I haven't started. Have we still got audio there, Stuart? I've lost audio.
Still good.
Guys.
All good. Everything's good.
Okay. All right. My focus tonight was going to talk about some antennas that will go at your house and some that will go on your car. So the area of multi-band antennas is quite another kind of black art. I know antennas is in general. But before I step into that, I just want to mention SWR. SWR is a parameter that we all play with as amateur radio users. However, I'm going to just make a statement and say that SWR by itself is certainly not the most critical important component of an antenna. It's certainly something to be considered. It's important to consider it because of our solid state transmitters. But SWR by itself, or a low SWR, doesn't necessarily mean that an antenna works well. So we'll come back to that as well. Multi-band antennas. Now, I think everybody with amateur licenses has had a look at multi-band Yagis, multi-band dipoles with traps in them. And I'm not going to talk too much about those because I think they're dealt with fairly much on an everyday basis in our amateur radio world. What I'd like to move on to is ones like the broadband dipoles, which are sometimes known as aperiodic antennas. Beverage probably fits into that category. We'd all probably like to have one, a rhombic. Disc cone antennas are all available for HF usage, but most of what I'm talking about requires a little bit of backyard space as well. Periodic or aperiodic dipoles. We're looking at, this is an antenna that Bushcom makes, in fact. It's pretty much a 3-wire type dipole. And for those of you that have had a look at the amateur radio handbook, the 3-wire dipoles, by having the 3 wires, the feed impedance of the antenna goes quite high. And the antenna itself then can be resonant, and it would need quite a, like a 9-to-1 type balun to feed a 50 ohm coax into the antenna. But at that mode, it would only be resonant at 1 frequency. With this particular antenna, they put a terminating resistor in the antenna. Doesn't sound like a good thing to have in an antenna, but it helps mop up the SWR or reduce the SWR to a value below about 2-to-1, which allows most solid state transceivers to put power into it across a wide range of frequencies. Now I'm just going to check I'm still hearing you, Stuart. Yeah, I've got some sticky connections going on here with my headset. Just say something for me.
Yeah, how's that? Can you hear me all right? I can hear you perfectly all right.
No, that's okay. I know I've got audio coming and going in my headset here.
Yeah, no, it seems perfectly good this end, Kim.
Okay, so what's a aperiodic antenna? Well, from a Bushcom point of view, let's have a go, see if I can get a picture up of it. So, double click this. Does that come up? That come up as a picture, Stuart?
Yes, it's perfectly good.
Okay, I'm not going to scroll through the words and read them out or anything. I'm just going to indicate that it's like a 3-wire dipole. They're relatively large antennas, ranging up to about 57 meters in length. The spacing on those 3 wires, the outer wires are approximately 1 meter apart. Does my cursor show up on the?
Yes, it does.
That's the feed balun there with the coax into the balun. The feed outside of the balun is feeding the outside wires of the dipole. And this little box in the middle is in fact a resistor network. The balun itself is a fairly a high ratio balun, and it has got some inductive balancing in it as well. Now, the beauty of that antenna is that it will represent less than 2-to-1 SWR over a frequency range from 3 megs to about 30 megahertz. Now, what varies considerably over that frequency range is the efficiency of the antenna to transmit. There'll be frequencies where that antenna is virtually resonant and its transmit efficiency will be quite high. There'll be other frequencies where it's not so resonant, but that resistor here in the middle will absorb some of the transmit power, but the majority of it will still radiate. The beauty of it is you stick it up in the sky, you hook a coax onto your radio, and it doesn't matter what frequency you poke into that antenna, it'll get you on air. They are a very good receiving antenna, general purpose receiving antenna. Now, for those of you that have had a look at the Bushcom antennas or the Bushcom website, that's just in the BBA range of antennas. The reason I mention this one is that this is one of the antennas that we choose to use in the commercial network because of the range of frequencies we need to use. And the other properties of this antenna, of course, is it's a high angle radiator, which means the signals are going relatively straight up towards the ionosphere and coming down relatively close to the base, ranging out to about, well, this antenna will work out to about 1,500 kilometers, but there are other antennas that work better at longer distances. A little side story, I recently put a base in Queensland. I mentioned I just got back into WA a while ago. At that commercial base, we've got one of these, and we also have a vertical antenna with an auto tuner on it, which I'll get to in a minute. And as I drove back to Western Australia, I did many signal strength tests between the 2 antennas, like remotely with my phone, I could switch antennas. And this antenna and the vertical antenna crossed over at about 800 kilometers. Now, and that's for the range of frequencies I was testing on. So a very good general purpose antenna for stations out to about 500 to 800 kilometers from a base station, Very, very flexible because there's no tuner required to put power into the antenna. Now, I mentioned at the beginning about SWR, and I said it's not that important as a parameter for how good an antenna works. An antenna that has 2-to-1 SWR or better is perfectly okay to use. The 2-to-1 figure, at 2-to-1, a lot of us amateurs might go, oh, that's not too good. At 1.5-to-1, I know a lot of amateurs don't like that as well. And I do hear a lot of people on air talking about how they get the antenna down to 1-to-1. The thing is that the representative of the lost power between a 1-to-1 SWR and a 2-to-1 SWR is probably around about 1 dB. A very, very small portion of an S unit at the far end.
Okay.
The beauty of this SWR, or the reason, sorry, for the SWR to be nominally wanting to get it below 2-to-1 is that reflected power has to be addressed by the transmitter. And with solid state transmitters above about 2-to-1, the reflected power will be used to start turning down the power of the transmitter. Meaning that if our SWR goes up above that, the transmitter needs to reduce its own transmit power to protect the transistors in the transmitter. So most amateur radio gear and most commercial radio gear will put out its full power, say nominally 100 watts if you like, up to an SWR of about 2-to-1, and above that the electronics will start to measure the SWR and make electronic adjustment to reduce the transmit power so that the transmitter doesn't break itself. But the difference between 2-to-1, 1.5-to-1, 1-to-1, not a particularly big difference as an end result at the far end. Look, there are issues with the losses increasing in the coax cable and so on as well. But like I said, in general, you're probably talking around about 1 dB of difference. Okay. So the SWR on this broadband antenna, it's below 2-to-1 over that range, a very good general purpose antenna. However, not as efficient as a single frequency dipole with a balun tuned to one particular band. So if I was to put up an 80-meter dipole or a 40-meter dipole and compare it to this antenna, I would find that the single frequency dipoles on transmit would probably yield me a better result at the far end, but of course limited to one band only. All right, I'll keep moving. A beverage, some amateurs probably have got those. They're basically a single wire, a balun feeding one end of a single wire, or if it's long enough, it becomes a long wire. And at the far end of that wire, a resistor that's terminated to ground. The wire in that instance receives and transmits along the direction of the wire. If you are using it as a transmit antenna, that resistor at the far end would need to be able to handle at least 50% of the power of the transmitter, generally only used as a receiving antenna. Disc cones, which I don't have a picture of at the moment. Let me just switch off this other image. Disc cones, everybody has probably seen those for VHF, but there are HF disc cones around. Now that's, I haven't got a picture of one, but kind of like a ground plane with a lot of radials hanging underneath it. Sometimes a vertical bit and some other direct horizontal sticking out. And that will give a 50 ohm feed impedance over a wide range. But for HF, they are becoming quite a physically large antenna. Okie doke. I just wanted to touch on that bushcom antenna because it is one that's used commonly in the commercial world. However, other antennas for home use, I often get people saying to me, what's the best antenna I can put up for HF amateur radio use at home? My answer is, if you have the space, put up a full wavelength loop antenna, horizontal to the ground. Now for 80 meters, for argument's sake, that's approximately 83 meters long, or about 20 meters on each side. What's that, Stuart? Lost audio again. No, I'm not hearing audio from him.
He's on mute. You're on mute, Stuart.
Yeah. That's Kim, that's a 84-meter roll of DX wire from Germany, ready to replace my current loop. It's a little bit worn and tired at the moment. So
I've actually put one up using 2mm aluminium MIG wire, and it stays up quite well as well. That particular loop, people say, but I can't make it into a loop. And I say, well, it doesn't matter what shape you make it, as long as you've got at least 3 points to hold it up in the air. And then if you've got 4 points, make it a square. If you've got 5 points, stretch it out in another direction. If you've got 6 points, stretch it out in another direction, and just make every point as high as you can make it. And the feed impedance of that loop, particularly at 80 meters, will be around about 100 ohms. You want approximately a 2-to-1 balun. The beauty of that loop is that it will fall in resonance on every multiple of the diameter band from 80 meters upwards. At 40 meters, at 80 meters, most of the power goes straight up, which is pretty much ideal for 80 meters because you're generally talking to people not that far away. Straight up to the ionosphere, bouncing down within close quarters to you, and again ranging out to say about 500 kilometers. Once you go to 40 meters, that loop, the lobes split into, well, let's just say they split, depends on the shape, but the angle of radiation starts to reduce. By the time you go to 20 meters, the angle of radiation is coming down fairly low. And on 20 meters, all bar a lobe going in the direction that you want to talk to somebody, it's starting to work reasonably well as a DX antenna. A very, very good general purpose antenna for the sake of 83 meters of wire in a balun. If you can't fit that much wire up in your backyard, the next thing is to put up a loop as big as you can and put one of the auto tuners on it, like the SGC auto tuners. There's a couple of different brand names. Bushcom have got their name on one that's similar. SGC make one, ICOM make one. They're all inherently similar devices where they've got relays switching loading coils in binary to make up inductance and in some cases capacitance to tune or match your 50 ohm cable into whatever wire is connected to them.
Just one question while we're touching on tuners there for a second. I currently have a tuner, but it's in the shack here rather than at the feed point, and I'm planning on moving up to the feed point. Would that be a positive move?
Oh, absolutely. On Wednesday nights, we run an 80-meter session where we talk about some of these things. And the tuner, many people have got tuners in the shack. And when you're running a tuner, is that running into coax or is that feeding straight into the wire?
No, it's feeding coax.
Yeah. Well, because the output of the tuner is not impedance matched to the coax, and the losses of the coax in that configuration are extremely high. And to move the tuner to the wire end of the antenna and run the coax up to the tuner, you're far, far, far better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
most of those tuners are really waterproof too. They've been built to kind of go outdoors. Even if you put it out on the eve, and if you've got a loop and you bring the ends of the loop down, kind of like as an open wire feeder to connect across the hot terminal and the ground of the body of the tuner, the open wire or the small section of open wire going up to where the loop starts is much less loss than coax cable.
Okay.
The beauty of that tuner and a general purpose loop is that that'll tune on much more than just the amateur bands if you're interested in other frequencies outside the amateur band. All right, so my pick for a simple antenna in my backyard is a 83 meter loop with a 2-to-1 balun connected to it. It's one of my best general purpose antennas. There's a few people that are kicking around that have got the loops with the tuners. They work extremely well, particularly on our commercial frequencies. We've got two 60 meter frequencies, two 5 meg frequencies, and I've got to say amateurs don't know what they're missing out on by not having a 60 meter frequency to play with. Okay, look, that's the backyard stuff. Mobile antennas, we'll just move really quickly through them. There's 2 commercial mobile auto tune antennas available. There's the Codan 9350, which has become quite popular in amateur circles. It inherently inside the canister. Have you all seen those black Eiffel Tower type antennas? Anybody know what
Yes, I've actually got one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Inside the canister, there's an inductor that runs about 2/3 the length of the black canister. There's a stepper motor drives a coarse threaded rod, and it pushes the piston up and down the inside of the inductor, making contact as it goes up and down, making it longer or shorter to tune the whip on top. They'll generally only tune a short whip, because if the whip becomes longer than a quarter wave for the frequency you're trying to tune, it becomes, or it needs capacitance as well, and there's no extra capacitance in those tuners to compensate for that. Okay, 9350 Codan, been around for a long time. They've made a number of different models of them. A very good antenna, very good efficiency for mobile usage over a wide frequency range. And of course, Barrett makes something similar, looks similar. Actually, there's two Barretts. There's one that looks like a stretched watermelon, which has been around for a while. And then there's, they probably wouldn't like me saying that. And then there's their new one that looks very much like the Codan antenna. The way it works is a bit different though. They've got inductors inside them, which are switched by relays. And if each inductor is a binary value or a double the value of the previous one. So if you can picture that with a group of those and switching in binary, you can make up a wide range inductor. So they have some advantages. The relays can switch much quicker than the motor drive pushing a piston up and down the Codan antenna. So generally their tune times are much faster. Overall, I think they work similar, although in some cases, I think the Codan antenna, I think I've seen what I would consider a little bit of gain or a little bit of advantage of the Codan antenna over the switched inductor Barrett antenna, but that's quite subjective. I don't actually have any real measurements on that. The other thing about both those antennas, and this is only really used in the commercial world, is they have received preamps in them. I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, but when the antenna is not tuned and the preamplifier is switched on, the antennas work or receive virtually the same as if they're tuned. And again, that's a bit like your tuner you were talking about before, being down the bottom of the coax or up at the antenna. The preamp in this instance is in the antenna. It preamplifies whatever it gets from the whip, and then it matches it to 50 ohms and feeds it down the coax to the radio. So it works very efficiently as a received preamp at that end. Whereas if you put a received preamp at the radio end, and you might remember some of the old CB linears and things used to have preamplifiers built into the linear amplifier. When you switch them on, yeah, they'd make your S meter go up, but they make the background noise go up the same amount. They don't really give you any improvement overall. But the receive preamps are a very important part of what the commercial radios are used for. All right, the other ones that you're probably all familiar with the mobile antennas, of course, there's screwdriver antenna. Everybody come across those? I know there's some auto-tune boxes to go on some of the screwdrivers. Most of them, you operate a switch and you watch the SWR and you wind it up or down until it tunes. Again, pretty similar to how the Codan antenna works, except it's not automatic, unless you've spent the money for one of the automatic boxes. Every antenna that we're talking about, every antenna that we could ever make is a compromise. We can never get up the biggest, best antenna that we might like to have. And the same for your backyard, same for your car. It's like where you mount the antenna and everything can make a difference, but at the end of the day, everything with antennas is a compromise. So we're looking for radiation efficiency, getting the power out of the antenna. On a car, we're also looking, does it pick up a lot of noise on receive? Does it get interfered with from the engine and so on? So where it's located, how it's earthed and everything can become fairly important with the mobile antennas. All right, how are we going at the moment? I haven't been watching the time. I don't want to.
Plenty of time. It's 9:30 our time, so we've still got plenty of time.
Okie doke. All right. Well, look, the broadband antennas or the multi-frequency antennas, when we move towards the commercial world, and another guy at the screen sharing here. Let's see what we get. Gonna do it.
Your audio's taken a nosedive again, Kim.
Oh, okay. Is that all right now or not?
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got crook connectors there. I'm not winning with this screen share. Oh, that's it there, I think. What are you seeing now?
We've got the your company logo and the PowerPoint, but not just in display mode, not in session.
Oh, right.
And your audio's plummeted again.
All right. Okay. How's that audio back?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And you got the logo at the moment, is that right?
No, I've got the black screen up, and I've got the slides across the bottom of the picture.
All right. Oh yeah. Okay. You're seeing that screen. Oh, okay. Oh, that's pretty tricky. It's got me over there now. I'm not winning with that. I think I'll just talk about it. I thought I'd get away with being able to use the two monitors, but it's not working. All right, I'm going to move and just briefly introduce the concept of the commercial HF radio networks, and then we'll see if we want to get some questions.
Yeah, your audio is still. It was perfect for the last 20 minutes. It's just.
Okay, how's that? 1, 2, 3, 4. How's that now?
It's not bad. It's still little bit of QSB.
Yeah. Look, I'll just do this. I'm on the laptop microphone now. Is that preferable?
If it's okay as long as it remains consistent. Give it a try and see how we go.
All right, I'll take that off because the earphones failed as well. So we'll go to the laptop mic and see what happens. Austravel Safety Net was started up because there's a lot of people traveling around Australia in remote areas, and I was going to show you guys I wonder if I drop the second monitor. I'll see what happens here. Hang on. Are you still there?
Yes, we are. We're still here.
All right. No, I can't do it. I can't run that. I'm struggling with technology. Austravel was started up because of people traveling in remote areas and the fact that Telstra only covers about 21% of Australia, Telstra being the largest coverage mobile phone network. And pretty much all the camp places, if you go up to bitumen anywhere, all the camp places that you might go to, so you go down a gravel road, there is no mobile phone coverage. Because not everybody wants to go and do an amateur license, and under the licensing structure available from the ACMA, it is practical for an organisation to license a bunch of frequencies. And as club members, the Austravel can authorise the members to use those frequencies with commercial grade type approved radios. So that's kind of how it started up. And then in addition to that, the radios themselves have what's called cell call built in. Does that mean anything to anybody, cell call?
Yes.
Okay, it's a FSK signalling system that's built into all the commercial radios. And every radio gets an individual ident like a phone number. So now you've got the ability to call from one radio to another, actually make it ring like a phone to indicate to somebody you want them to pick the microphone up and talk to you. Those radios can also have GPSs connected to them, where when you send the GPS coordinates, the radio reads the GPS, loads the numbers into the data string, and sends it out as FSK to wherever you're sending it. Same deal with making a phone call. If you're talking to a base station that's connected into appropriate equipment, and all of our base stations have got phone patch units, automated phone patch units on them, by putting a phone number into the microphone, sending it on an appropriate channel, the phone patch unit will do an auto connect to the phone line, and you can make phone calls through it. So you can send GPS positions, make phone calls, and you can also write messages, which can either be sent as SMSs to mobile phones or drop into store and forward mailboxes that are in the system. So with these features, we've opened up a range. Well, firstly, the radios have had these features for 20 years, but they haven't really been utilized by anybody. So by piggybacking those features into the internet through a little Linux computer, we can take the GPS coordinates and we can feed them into a central database. There's a mobile phone app that links into the same database. So friends, family, kids, grandkids can have an app on their phone and they can bring up where you're camping if you've lodged a position. They can look at your trail of positions that you've put in over the last few weeks while you've been moving around. In addition, more importantly is the radios have got one button on them. With a non-technical person can push one button, the radio makes an emergency call, sends out a FSK data string on 5 different frequencies, one after the other, and every base listens for that particular data call, and if it's heard, it sends, the base computer decodes it and sends an SMS to about 12 people, and it tells those people the base that heard who made the call, what base heard it, what channel heard it, what time it was heard, and the GPS coordinates of the station making the call all get forwarded through as an SMS as an emergency call. And then the response is for a responder to reverse dial back into the base, which we can do. Those phone patch units, we can ring into them. I can select any channel on the transmitter and I can make a voice call with my phone and say, Fred, what's the nature of your emergency? And then whether it's flat tires, bogged, broken down, or medical emergency, we choose the direction that it goes after that. So for the travellers, there's an opportunity to join a club, buy a HF radio. Club membership is their license. Austravel, for example, has 9 frequencies from 3 megs to 17 megs. We have 6 bases across Australia. Every base has got those features that I just talked about. The only real problem is teaching people how to use their radios, and we run lots of camping times and chats and talks and a bit of red wine sometimes to help people understand how to use their radio. But in general, most people get on air fairly well with the system. I mentioned before, we got 2 5 meg frequencies, which are pretty nice as general purpose point-to-point, mobile-to-mobile or mobile-to-base type frequencies. And I have to say, across Australia, our 5 meg frequencies are used more than any other channel. So it'd be nice when we get some as an amateur band. But those mobile antennas I talked about, and just jumping back to the ones that have got preamplifiers in them. The reason for the preamplifier is that the commercial radio, when it's not being used, is scanning all 9 channels. And as it's scanning those frequencies from 3 megs to 17 megs, the antenna can't keep changing channel for the scan. So what happens is it goes to a fixed position, the preamp is switched on, and the receiver is capable of receiving. So if on air there's an FSK type data call sent by anybody to anybody, every radio that hears that data call, and it has about a 6-second leader of mark space, all the radios can scan 9 channels in less than 6 seconds. So it means that on hearing the leader, every radio hearing it stops scan, listens to the FSK data, decodes it, and if it's not for them, all those radios immediately go back to scan. The one radio that it is for stops, tunes the antenna by putting the transmitter on that channel, puts 20 watts in the antenna tunes, and then the radio answers back with an answer back signal depending on what the call signal was. So it could be 6 short pips, it could be 4 long dashes, depending on the type of call that was made to it. But the person at the far end, the person initiating the call, listens by ear and they hear that reply tone come back from the distant radio. So they are able to evaluate whether they've chosen a good HF channel to make that call on. And in the case of doing what's called a channel test call, if they didn't think the answer back signal was very good, or if they didn't get one at all, they perhaps would choose a different frequency and repeat the process. They do exactly the same if they're talking into the base. You may try 2 or 3 different frequencies to Perth base before you've selected what you think is the good one. And then you would actually make your phone call, make your GPS send call, or send a message or an SMS. So by doing that, the person out in the field is actually interacting with the base. There's no human involved. The radio is responding, giving them the answer backs. And then when they send their information, it's all handled by computers to either go to the phone network or SMS to mobile phone and so on. So that's kind of what's in place in the commercial world. We try to teach people a bit about propagation. We talk to them about HAP charts, which I haven't mentioned tonight. But I must say, out of the commercial side of things as well, we've got a lot of new amateurs. A lot of them have gone and got their F-call. And of course, the commercial radios will support amateur frequencies without any problem at all. 2 of the commercial radios can run free tune transmit within the amateur bands. So you can dial up any amateur frequency if you've got that option switched on. So it is a world that's pouring some amateurs back into the amateur side of things, which is good. And I must say, some of them over here have gone through and got their standard license since as well. So the auto-tune antennas, though, it's an important thing for the commercial radio because the radios scan on receive. The preamp is important for that receivability. And then the selective calling, or the FSK data type calling, is what makes it all possible in the commercial world. All right, a bit of a mixed bag of things. Running for about 40 minutes, I think, at this stage. So kind of figured there'd be people with questions and things, and we'll deviate from there. So are you the question master, Stuart?
What we'll do is we'll roll it up and leave it open to the floor. We've only got a relatively small audience today, unfortunately. So what I was going to say is we'll throw it open to questions. I might just sort of conclude what I started before. It probably an inopportune time. Yeah, I've got, like I said, I've got an MFJ tuner in the shack here, which is coax feed up to a 80-meter loop. And I'm about to put a AT140 ICOM, if I can get it from a bloke who has got it up for sale at the moment, at the feed point of the antenna on the top of the pole. So I appreciate your advice in regard to the potential performance advantage of being at the feed point. So thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that have got that exact antenna combination set up in Perth, and certainly when I was coming back down from the north in October, I was talking to them, and their signal from the loop antenna, when I was still 1,800 odd kilometres away up at Western Australia, they were doing better than the dipole that's actually on Perth base for the same frequency,
Okay.
which I was quite surprised about. The other thing you can mess around with that loop, if you're in an area where you've got a bit of local noise from your neighbours, you can mess around and decide which way you ground it. You know, kind of like the polarity, which side of the loop you put on the hot terminal and which side you bring back to ground on the tuner. You may find that one way or the other will give you less noise if your noise is coming from a particular direction.
Okay. Okay. The other interesting question you actually answered in the presentation tonight was most of the standard auto tuners like the AT series from ICOM, etc., only have an input feed on them, and they're normally sort of focused on it like a single wire or a long wire type antenna. Where I was the question I was going to ask is it correct to terminate the other end of the loop to the ground terminal on the tuner? And you obviously answered that for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. And even when those tuners have got just a straight piece of wire on them, they still really need to be working with a counterpoise. So think about a yacht, for example, where it's feeding the rear mainstay of the yacht.
Yep.
The tuner needs to be earthed back down to the water as best as possible, be it keel, be it rudder, be it an earthing, capacitive earthing plate through the hull. If it's just the wire that someone's got up in some trees, you still need to have them connected to the roof of your house, the gutter, or other wires, things down to ground to get them to work properly anyway. Every antenna needs a counterpoise of some description in some form. So earthing the loop back to the earth point on the bottom of the tuner, it's probably got an earth start on it that's separate to its feet.
Okay, and the one other question before without hogging it from everybody else, I've got mine a standard galvanized iron water pipe length, as in 6 meters up from the ground, because it was the convenient structure that I had. Any thoughts as far as, particularly in an urban environment, of elevation? I know the theory says it should be a quarter wave above the ground, but that's not real practical in urban areas. So what's your experience with that?
Well, it comes back to the compromise. It's like it's the most wire that you can get in the sky as high as you can possibly get it, and that's your best antenna you're going to get up.
Yeah.
Look, 6 meters is pretty good at the tune point on a loop. The one thing about the loops, they actually work pretty good close to the ground. Because they're generally, particularly when you're getting to 80 meters, it's a high angle radiator. They've got a tendency to ignore noise coming in laterally from your neighbours to some extent. So look, yeah, 6 meters at the tune point, that's pretty good.
All right. Thanks, Kim. All right, guys, I'll throw it open the floor. Who next question, please?
Well, I think I jump in here. Good evening, Kim. Very good presentation, very interesting. Well, I have a loop as well. I think I'm the one who had it the longest of all of us, and I think we have 3 people in the club with a loop, and I certainly experimented back in the days with all different types of antennas and stuff, and the loop is definitely by far the best. Mine is fed with coax and the tuners in here, but I might change that after your thing there. The net that you guys run with the travelers, is there any cost involved for the people that participate, or because that certainly sounds very interesting?
Yeah, look, the costs, the club membership works out. It's the club membership's $100 a year. Mm-hmm. But that is also the license to transmit. We actually split it into 2 separate fees because we've got some very old commercial radios in the club as well that can't do some of the messaging and the GPS sending I mentioned. So we actually have a $70 fee that really covers licensing, and mm-hmm. those people can be in the club and use their radios on the commercial frequencies. The extra $30 a year lets people send their GPS position and make phone calls, and that also includes the cost of all of the phone calls and SMSs. So there's no additional costs over and above that. But the flat full fee is $100 a year.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. I'm not a traveler in that regard, but I just was curious what the cost is. But that's pretty reasonable. I mean, if you spend some time out there somewhere, it's definitely very helpful, I guess, And so,
well, we found for some of the ones that have got grandkids and things like that, being able to mark up their GPS position alone, and because every grandkid knows how to use a smartphone, they can look on the map, look on Google Maps, see that they've moved from yesterday. They can go to satellite imagery and actually have a look around the area and so on. So it saves the grandparents having to make everyday contact with the grandkids, but still helps maintain some of that feeling of they're being in touch, because they know what they're doing. And then, of course, their own kids can actually write messages on. You can write a message on the smartphone that actually goes back into the store and forward mailbox, and you can retrieve messages back on your HF radio that have been written on a phone. So I was coming down to Gibb River Road a couple of years back, and my brother was sitting in Scotland in McDonald's, and he was writing messages on his phone because he had free Wi-Fi there. I'm getting the messages on the Gibb River Road and answering him on the with the writing messages on the radio. So we're having a little conversation while I was belting down the Gibb River Road between there and Scotland, but it was done with text.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Just comment before you go, just on your loop and your coax feed, even if you could take the coax out and make a very simple open wire or get a ladder line type feed from the loop down to the tuner, it will work better, because the losses that are in the ladder line, it's still mismatched, but the losses in the ladder line will be much less than the losses in the coax cable. Because although your tuner is matching the radio, and it makes the SWR go down for the radio, you can still consider that on the upside of the tuner, there's still a lot of SWR between the tuner and the antenna itself.
Yeah.
The radio is just not seeing it because the tuner is. So the losses in the coax are very high.
Yeah. Well, I was playing with that actually in the earlier days, and I did have ladder line connected to it, but then I just sort of switched back to the coax because yeah, I was just experimenting, and it stayed so far. But as I said, I will definitely consider that in the future. Thank you.
Next person, Bryce, you've unchecked you.
Yeah, just one question, Kim, and thank you, of course, for coming on tonight. Have sat phones had an impact on HF radio networks?
Yeah, look, it's one of the options, and I say to people, people going out bush, don't go bush without a HF radio or a sat phone, and or at an absolute minimum a PLB. The thing about the sat phones, they had a bit of a bad rap a few years back because one of the satellites went off to Mars and they didn't tell anybody when they were positioning it. So there was a fairly big gap over Australia for sat phone usage for quite a few years. That has improved now, I think, and there's reasonable coverage with sat phone. The costs of the phones are still fairly high. The ongoing costs are still fairly high, and the call costs are quite high. So a lot of people who've got sat phones don't tend to, they've got them for emergency use. They don't make a lot of regular contact with them. The other thing is, not many people have got them set up in cradles with external antennas such that they can be switched on. So they very hard, unless they make a sked with somebody, they can't really be contacted on the sat phone either for an incoming call, because it won't work just leaving it switched on sitting on the seat of the car. So there's pros and cons, whereas the HF can be on all the time, of course. The other thing with sat phones, we say to people, well, it's all well and good, you've got your four-wheel drive and your sat phone, and you're at the back of Meekatharra somewhere in the middle of the night, and you suddenly get too many flat tires. We say, well, who are you going to call with your sat phone? Because you don't have your data access to look up internet to work out who's the towing service that might come out from Meekatharra to where you are. So you've got this, we just say to people, ring your mum, because they haven't got directory assistance. So one of the things we are doing in Austravel as well, we've got a social level membership, and people can join with sat phones. They get a list of our emergency responders. So a sat phone user could ring me, for argument's sake, on one of them. So tell me where they're stuck, give me their GPS coordinates, tell me what they need, and I'll say, all right, look, give me 20 minutes. I'll make 20 phone calls for them to try and find a service that can actually come and help them. When they ring me back, I can say, look, bring Bill's towing service in Carnarvon. They'll come out and get you. You can, and here's the number. Here's the person to talk to. So the sat phones, yep, it's better than nothing. But we don't think you get the feeling of community with a sat phone that you get with HF, where you could be out there organising to get some parts sent up to fix your vehicle. And one of the things that has happened with broken axle was they're up the track somewhere, and of course they're talking about how to get this thing out to Kalgoorlie to get it freighted up. Next minute someone pipes up because they're listening on HF, and they say, look, we're going up that track next week. We'll pick the freight up. We'll bring it up to you. So you've got this party line community aspect that works quite well with the HF as well. So there's pros and cons for both. I wouldn't say that sat phones eroding the HF market.
So you see them as supplementary, is that right?
I think it's complementary.
Yeah.
And I'd say to people when I'm talking to them at the forward drive shows, I say, at least take one or the other. Take something. Some of these young guys, you know, they'll spend, because a brand new HF radio, there's no change out of $4,000 for a brand new radio, and they go, oh yeah, I don't want to spend that much money, but they'll spend $5,000 putting a couple of spare wheel carriers on the back of their four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
You go, well, what are you doing that for? They go, oh, well, I need them in case I get stuck.
Yeah, but they won't rescue their life, will they, if they get stuck somewhere and they can't get out?
Exactly. And the other one we see is people say, oh, that we always go out with 2 or 3 vehicles. We don't really need a sat phone or a HF radio. And I point out to them, that's all well and good for mechanical breakdown. But if someone has a medical emergency, you can't have someone driving 100 k's to get the mobile phone to work to call in a medical emergency. So one vehicle at least should have HF or sat phone.
Yeah, well, Kim, I do a lot of outback travelling when I can. The last 12 months has been a bit of a joke, but one of the first expenses I spent some years ago was a PLB in the car, and that stays there as the bare minimum going out in that space.
Yep, and look, they're so cheap now. They are $250 for something the size of a cigarette packet. Yeah. I carry one of those in my backpack when I'm prospecting. I've got HF, I might be walking 2-3 kilometres from the car, and there could be circumstances arise where I either can't move or don't want to move, and if it's life-threatening, I'll be setting off the PLB. Look, in addition to that, we run a registration service with AMSAR. There's a paragraph that we get people to copy into their AMSAR contact details, and it gives, when their PLB goes off, it brings up on the screen that they've got a HF radio as well, and it gives AMSAR the opportunity to contact one of our controllers, and we'll make effort to try and contact you back via HF. Now, where that comes into play is if the PLB's perhaps been accidentally triggered. Now, we've had a couple of these, and you might get a call on the HF, and I go, Stuart, you know, you've set your PLB off. What's going on? And you go, no, I haven't. You look around, you find the dog's playing with a new toy. Or we've just recently found out that the metal detectors, people, when you put your metal detector down, if you put the coil down on top of the PLB, some instances where the metal detector, when it's switched on, is triggering the PLBs.
Oh, nasty.
There's been some false triggerings created like that. So same deal, the person doesn't even know their PLB's been triggered. Now, AMSAR have to treat it as a life-threatening emergency. Mm-hmm. And of course, if the HF in the meantime can just validate that it's not genuine emergency, or secondly, it could be a genuine emergency. And again, by making contact, it might be that the first response you get is an appropriate response, rather than just a cop car driving out to see what you triggered the beacon for. It might be an ambulance is needed, a helicopter is needed. Now, of course, they could call that emergency in through HF as well, but it's just another string to the bow, basically.
One thing I found it's interesting was I've got a GME electrophone PLB, and it reached the point where the battery life had passed the lifespan of the battery, and the battery had to be replaced. It was actually cheaper to replace the entire unit than it was to send it off to GME to replace the battery. So I've now got one that's decommissioned, right, and a new one in the car. But to me, it's a tragic waste of a piece of kit. But the silly part was, for me to send this to GME to replace the battery and get it back, it was actually cheaper to buy a new one.
That's the sad world of economics, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they wouldn't supply me with a battery. They said, we'll put a new battery in it, but we will not give you a battery to put in it yourself.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. And sadly, that's just so they get to sell more, I guess, at the end of the day. it probably still works. Battery. I mean, it's still probably a functional unit, but you just can't rely on it. That's all.
Yeah, and being the nature of the type of unit, I'd like to be able to rely upon it.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So next person, we'll get somebody else there with some questions, please. Rocky, you're about to put a loop in. You're a good man, should have some questions.
I'll just jump in for a minute. You hear me okay, Kim?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, good. I'd just like to reiterate your, or certainly what the other guys have said, and thank you for presenting tonight. Very interesting. Yeah, I'll go along with you on. I've got an 80-metre loop as well. I'm in the suburb of Footscray, which is one of the inner old suburbs of Melbourne. Very small blocks. The whole house block's only 7 metres wide and 36 metres deep. And I've got an 80-metre loop on it, about 6 metres up. You know, similar to Richard, and I've had a very good run with it. Yeah, I was just showing Rocky my logbook the other day. I've worked a lot of international stations on 80 through to 6 metres actually, and I'm feeding mine with 300 ohm ladder directly into the parallel input of a manual tuner, and yeah, I did a test with one of our other members, Damien VK3TQ recently, and the only band it seems to be a little bit flat on was 17 metres, but all the rest, especially 20 metres upwards, it works really well. So,
well, like I say, 17 metres, it's not resonant anymore. Have you got a full 83 odd metres of wire up or not?
Yep, I've got about yeah, I think it is about 83 metres actually. Yeah,
it's probably close to natural resonance for all of the amateur bands. You've just got to do a bit of impedance fixing. Once you go to 17 metres, it's not one of those multiples.
no.
So the tuner's working a bit harder to match it. But yeah, look, best general purpose antenna in a backyard if you can put one up, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah, and I use the same, that really thin DXY that Stuart's used, and the wire itself's virtually invisible. You just see these four posts sticking up on the corner. So, and yeah, good work with your radio network. It sounds fantastic. So, yeah.
Well, I'll give you a couple of bits of information. There's particularly for testing antennas and things on the Austravel website. There's 2 SDR receivers that are open for public use. Now, Austravel is spelled AUSTRAVEL. So Austravel Safety Net, one word, .org.au. So the .org bit's a hard bit to find. So AustravelSafetyNet.org.au. And one of the tabs on the web page there is called Listen. When you go to that tab, down the bottom, there's the East receiver and the West receiver. Now, they're each a Kiwi SDR. Now, when you select the channels, it drops the receiver onto the Austravel frequency that you select. So our 9 channels appear next to each receiver. So once you're in the receiver, you can go into the frequency pane. You can put any frequency you like in the receiver. So if you want to do a check, see how well you're getting out to the west or how well you're getting up to about Brisbane, you can use those receivers, and there's an S meter on them, and there's a spectrum analyzer and a waterfall display and everything. They both work quite well. They've both, in fact, got that broadband antenna I mentioned before, made by Bushcom, because that antenna provides pretty close to 50 ohm match across the whole of HF. The one of them's at my place in Yarloop, which is about 100 kilometres south of Perth, and it's up in bush camp on a 100-acre property running on solar power. There is no mains power around it. The noise floor is about minus 130 dBm. And the other one up in Brisbane is in a 300-acre scout camp area. And apart from a little bit of noise off one of the power supplies at the moment, which we're rectifying, it's also in a very low noise area. So the signal to noise that you'll get off those is pretty good. And you're welcome to play with them as test antennas, test receivers if you wish to.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds, yeah, I'm just writing that down now as a, so if it's Austravel
Yeah, Austravel, Austravel.
Yeah.
Safety Net, one word. So just big German word, Austravel Safety Net. .org.au.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Whoever put that up. And there's a listen tab. Just click the listen tab. There's a bit of guff there about skeds and what's a sked and so on and so on. And then you go down, but you'll see there's east receiver, west receiver, and then the 9 channels. Below that, there's some frequencies to select some of the marine channels as well.
Yeah.
When you're in the receiver, you can put any frequency in it. And look, you can muck around. There's noise blankers, there's rigid decoders, there's DSP. There's a whole heap of things in those Kiwi SDRs. They're a fantastic little device. So you're welcome to play with those. Four people can use those at a time. So and they're totally independent. So it's not like once you're on it, you block someone else out. The West Australian one, we've got a 10-minute timeout on it. Inactivity timeout. If you're messing around with it, I think it leaves you on there. But if you just sit there on one frequency for more than 10 minutes, it'll time you out. But they're a pretty fun thing, because as a waterfall display, you can see the whole of the HF spectrum as well.
Beautiful.
So you see some pretty interesting things going on. Now, the other little ad I want to get out before we finish, on Wednesday nights at 9:30 Zulu, I run a scared on 80 meters on 340, and it's on upper sideband on 80 meters.
So what was the frequency again, Kim?
It's on 3640 on upper sideband.
Righto.
Now, the reason it's on upper sideband is I mentioned before that with Austravel, we had quite a few members go out and get F calls. And I had people saying to me, I don't know why I bothered. I can't talk to anyone on the other bands. Now, bear in mind, they're operating from their mobile at this stage. They're trying to talk to people on 80 meters. And of course, some of the radios don't have lower sideband, being commercial radios, unless you can option them for lower, but a lot of them don't have lower sideband. So I started this net on upper sideband to get these guys to call in and use amateur procedures to start calling into a net. And you know, we slowly got them on air, and we slowly got them talking on the amateur bands. That net, it's summer. I might be a bit light on over there at that time at the moment because the sun's still pretty high. But certainly through the winter months, we get quite a few eastern states callers on that net as well. And I run a full wave loop, and I run 400 watts on it when I'm doing it.
Okay.
What was the date again?
It's on Wednesdays. It won't be this Wednesday. I'll probably start again this year, whatever the date after. Not what's this Wednesday? The 18th or something? The one after that, anyway. Where's my calendar?
Yeah, the 20th.
Yeah.
20th or the 27th.
Yeah, so it won't be.
Sorry.
It'll be the
7th or 24th.
No, 17th is Sunday.
February. Sorry, I'm in.
No, January. Probably January the 27th is probably when I'll start.
Right.
Although that's pretty close to Australia Day, so I don't know what will happen there as well. But it will definitely be on in Feb. And like I said, we generally have a call in for about 15-20 minutes. Often people have asked me or rung me up and asked me about things, and sometimes it might be antennas and SWR and bits and pieces, and if we can, we'll have a bit of a technical chat about something or other. Sometimes we talk about some of the features to do with the commercial network. It's just whatever's on the plate on the day. And we usually have about 15 people on the net. So.
Okay. Can we just, can I get you just to repeat the time just for a sec?
Yeah, it'll be, it's 5:30 West Australian time, 9:30 Zulu GMT. So it's going to be about 8:30 your time.
No worries. Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, that'll be good for this club, because basically we usually run a Wednesday net just before that. So people, if they want to change from one to the other, it's just going to work nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a bit of it. And like I said, it's summer. The sun's pretty high still in WA at that time at the moment, but certainly in winter we're getting across the country at that time, no problem.
Beautiful.
All right, that were my ads out of the way anyway.
Okay, good night,
It's all
Michael.
good.
Okay, next questions. I thought, Rocky, you would have been asking questions about your plans to put up a loop.
Well, sorry. First of all, good evening, Kim. Good evening, everyone. Pretty much you guys all answered the questions that I wanted to hear. So,
No worries.
There you go.
All right, are you putting a loop up as well, Rocky?
yeah, the guys have convinced me to put one up, Kim, because I've been running off center fed dipoles for some time, and they're not doing me any good. So conditions are not good, but I think it's time to put up a loop because most of the guys are running them, and everyone's getting great reports, and of course noise and everything else, and so forth. So I figured I've got a little bit of real estate here, so the guys have convinced me.
I tell you, one of the you mentioned, Stuart, you mentioned about putting the tuner up the pole 6 meters high. One of the guys has got a vertical on that same pole at the tuner, and a knife switch to actually swap from the loop, the horizontal loop, by pulling a knife switch. It swaps over to the vertical, because the vertical is better as a longer range and like a true overseas antenna. The loop's pretty good in Australia. So the vertical being a lower angle radiator.
Yep.
When the auto tuner tunes that, it's about it's probably getting close to a quarter wave on 40 meters, the length of the vertical, a little bit under. So when he tunes that on 40 meters as a DX antenna, that's much better than trying to use the loop as a DX antenna.
Okay, good point.
But it's much noisier.
Yeah.
The vertical in the metro area.
Noise in where I'm 8 kilometres southwest of Melbourne Airport on the Bendigo Road. We're just off it, and Richard is only just a couple of blocks away, literally. Here, sort of on my loop, I'm regularly seeing sort of noise levels on the 40-metre band of around sort of S4, S5, and basically I've had other people that are not using loops or using other antennas are reporting much higher noise levels. So it's obviously not just my perception, it's obviously a reality that the loop is considerably quieter in some aspects.
Yep. Well, even those receivers I mentioned, they're great to measure your own transmit capability to see what strength comes back. But quite a few people transmit from home, even on my net. They actually transmit from home, but they receive on the SDR receivers because although they can hear me as a rule up in Perth, they can't hear that many of the other members in the net, whereas the SDR receivers can hear everybody. So they often sit there and receive on the internet and still transmit from home.
So good idea. Find a friend in a rural area and set up a remote listening station. Yeah,
that's exactly what these SDR receivers are. There's two of them. They're remote listening stations, but they're only on they're not on really DX antennas as such.
Stuart, I just have to quickly butt in there. If you have only S4, S5 on 40 meters, and you're literally a kilometer away, I think I have to drop some carriers on you. That's not fair. Because I have usually an S6 on 40 and 6.5 to 7 on 80. That's the average.
Seems to be very changeable. Sometimes it's better than others. There are some days where it's atrocious, but it's damn near S8, but they're sort of not that common.
That's pretty common with me. S8 noise on 40 meters is pretty normal for me.
Yeah,
especially during the day.
I get 10 over 9.
But look, noise is another whole topic. I won't start on it too much now, but a lot of people, the noise that you've got, many people are making noise in their own home because of the plug packs and things. The legal aspect of those little plug pack adapters, and when you work out all the figures, they're allowed to be up to about S9 across HF at 30 meters. So there's no components inside them to keep noise in the box.
Well, as I found out with one device I have here, which is an NVR video recorder for cameras. The circuit board has artwork on it for a couple of large noise suppression capacitors in the switch mode power supply in the unit, but obviously as a production option they've deleted them
because they can get away with selling them in Australia without them.
Yep.
Yep.
Crude and rude.
Look, quickly though, with noise, if you get a receiver, hook it up to a battery in your shack, and then go and turn your own main switch off, and that's the beginning, and see if that makes any difference. If turning your own main switch off doesn't make any difference, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, well, I've eliminated quite a few sources of noise doing exactly this, because I run both. I've got a ICOM 7300 and an ICOM 9700, and I run them both off a sealed lead acid battery with a battery charger. The reason being is that two reasons, exactly what you said, you can use it for hunting noise. And the other thing is that with a battery rather than a linear power supply, you cannot get an over voltage situation. And therefore you get less chance of cremating your radio through a power supply fault.
It also means that if you have a mains failure in the suburb, you can enjoy amateur radio for a while until the power comes back on.
Exactly.
And I actually did that. We had power go out for an hour or so last year it was, and it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and
right on the grey line.
I went through the bands with S0 noise. I think it was about S1 on 80 metres. It was just fantastic. I could hear all these overseas stations on 80 metres.
Yeah, I know exactly. So yeah, that's what we were. So it makes you think about getting your chainsaw out to the poles out the front, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm gonna go now, guys. So thank you very much, Kim, and thank you, Stu, for arranging this. And good evening, guys. Have a good night. I'm struggling to stay awake, and catch you all later. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, Bill.
I appreciate it as well. Cheers.
Bill.
So, quick question, Kim, seeing you've got a advanced call, did you start off as an amateur or did you start off as a technician?
I know I started off as a pirate, like everybody else probably. In high school, we didn't have any money, so we had to learn how to make our own transmitters and receivers out of, it was all valves. We were building valve gear when I was at high school.
Mm-hmm.
I used to run about 400 watts on 27 megs. And then when I was going to turn 18, I thought if they actually do come and knock on my door, they could prosecute me once I was 18. I thought I'd better go and do my own license. So I went and actually I did my full call straight up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably the opposite. I had a lot of friends who were amateurs and been dogged to get into the hobby for a long time, and it wasn't until in my mid 40s till I actually became an operating amateur. So a late arrival to the hobby.
Yeah, well, that's great too, because there's so many facets that you can pursue with amateur radio, of course, as you know.
Yeah.
But no, I probably ended up working in electronics and communications as a result of my interest at school. So,
Okay.
But I did find the exam hard doing it out of high school. I probably, after I've worked in the industry for a few years, because I did quite a lot of TV and broadcast transmitter maintenance and stuff like that. So I probably would have found it easier to do a few years later, but anyway.
Fair enough. All right, guys, another round of questions, and then it's getting on the late side here now, so we might give it another run around the shop and see how we go. Any more questions, guys? John, you're very quiet in the corner over there. You're still on mute, mate.
Audio's muted, John. Can you unmute him, Stuart?
No, I can't. I'm going to have to request.
You're going to have to lip read. Here we go.
That's better.
My bad. I was going to ask, you did your amateur radio license. Did you go any further technically, or?
I did my I ended up working for Telstra or Telecom at that stage, and in broadcast TV, radio, microwave maintenance. When I was getting out of there, I actually started doing my ship's radio operator certificate.
Yeah.
I did my broadcast ops. I did my TV ops certificate in the avenue of looking for jobs outside the government. And then as I was doing that, we'd started business, myself and some other guys, and we ended up going into our own business in electronics manufacture. We were the largest consumer of electronic components for about 5 years in a row in Australia. And then an American company came and bought us in '98 and told me to go on holidays.
Okay.
That's a nice problem to have.
Is it a company we know,
or? Not specifically. We were specialising in closed circuit TV security systems. We ended up making very large matrix video switching systems. Typically we're in some of the casinos and things, camera systems had 3,000 cameras, 2,500 video recorders. All video recorders are remote controlled by the central system and so on. And pretty big systems, all in analog video. And then because everything's different now, but that was they were just big matrix video switching systems.
So you were talking earlier about the Bushcom antennas. Did you have much of a hand in the design of some of those, or?
Only the loop that's coming up, the auto-tune loop, which is approximately 2 meters, or approximately 8 meters around, like 2 by 2 by 2. And that's got a variable capacitor on it that's driven by a motor. So that's the crux of the antenna. Then there's an electronics board that actually looks at SWR and controls the motor as a function of SWR. So I was involved with the design of that and that board, but also the microprocessor on that. I've actually, another person's written the software. I'm more involved with the what do you call it, the methods of operation, because apart from tuning the loop, with the commercial radios, there are control lines that go back into the radios to tell the radio it is tuned and so on, because that circuit board's detecting the tune point, and it's got to tell the radio when it's ready, and then the radio moves on to the next thing that it was going to do. And all the radios have got different control lines in different directions and things like that. So,
yeah, just curious, that's all. I was going to say, years ago, I bought a very early Bushcom antenna. I've always been interested in the design of it. It was a full run of the SWC 100, I think.
What did it look like? What was the format?
It's a single wire antenna with 2 resistors in it, basically.
Yeah, it basically becomes an aperiodic. Well, a single wire one is, it's an aperiodic antenna. The resistors effectively absorb the SWR.
Yeah, I figured that.
So it comes back to the fact that the transmitter still puts out full power because it's happy it's less than 2 to 1. Maybe up to half the power lost in the resistors. That's only 3 dB. That's only half an S unit. It's not a big deal.
No, I was just interested in the design theory behind it. But.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the Bushcom antennas are designed around practicality. That their main market is military and paramilitary type markets, where a lot of the commercial radios go. So, dipoles that can be rolled out to marker points for the channels, or thrown over trees and things like that. So that people can get comms up and running easily. So a lot of it's designed around practicality more than anything, I think.
Kim, just a quick question. In my previous life, I used to be in Victoria Police, and VicPol at one stage had a whole array of HF radios, and in their wisdom or lack of it, they've decommissioned them all. Can't quite work that one out, but when I was working at Mildura, the base station antenna there, and the radio was a Tate radio, and the antenna, I don't know what brand it was, but it was very similar to the Bushcom you showed tonight, but instead of having 3 elements, it had 2 elements.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering whether you might know of what it may have been.
I don't know by brand. Pretty much the same method of operation in that it's a folded dipole with a terminating resistor in it. But I don't know what brand it is. I've got a funny feeling Codan but they won't make it. They put their name on it. But I don't know who the company name would be on that one.
Yeah, all I know is it only had 3 channels on the same band, so it was effectively a very limited range antenna. It didn't have to have a wide range.
Oh, you mean it wasn't a broadband antenna?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Probably better off with a dipole, wouldn't it?
Probably would have been better off. The police, like I say, the HF issue. Look, I know the West Australian police struggle to keep HF in their network as well because upper management don't think there's a need. They all think the mobile phone works everywhere.
No.
2 years ago, they had a search at Mount Augustus.
Yep.
And about 6 police cars rolled up there, and then they suddenly realised that their phones didn't work. Then they realised that their UHF radios didn't work. 3 of the cop cars had HF. Then they realised that no one actually knew how to turn the HF radios on.
Oh, lovely.
And raised a bit of an issue as well. But yeah, they struggled to keep. And then in the fires in New South Wales last year, year before now, just down the bottom there, they've taken the HF out of all of the police cars in the southern part of New South Wales. And when all the comms went down the bottom there and everybody's piled up on the beach, they actually flew 2 Codan man packs down by helicopter to drop into the police so that they could have some comms back into Sydney.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing worked.
Yes, some very smart decisions are made in bureaucracies.
Yep. That's the sad thing is HF's the last resort, therefore it hardly ever gets used. But when it's needed, it's needed.
Well, just as an anecdote, in 1980, 81, I was sitting in the watch house at Mildura police station on night shift. The policeman at Can River in Gippsland down towards Malakuta, who was attending a fatal motor car accident. The only person he could communicate with was me.
Yeah.
And I was then relaying by phone all his comms back to Sale in Gippsland so he could get resources to basically cover what he needed.
Yep.
And if it hadn't been for that HF link, he would have had nobody to talk to.
Yeah. And it's very, very hard to, upper management's getting younger in a lot of these organisations now. And their mobile, the HF, look at the four-wheel drive shows, I used to be able to, with the older group, I can say, you've heard of the Flying Doctor radio? And they go, yep. And then I can say, well, the HF radios today are the same basic technology, but smarter and blah, blah, blah. Well, now at the four-wheel drive shows, I say to people, have you heard of the Flying Doctor radio? No. Oh, have you heard of shortwave radio? No. I don't even have a starting point there, so they've not heard of anything, That's the young crowd.
Yeah. Just along that lines of Flying Doctor radios, if you're at all curious, have a look go to qrz.com and look up my other call sign, which is VK6TQ.
Yeah.
There's a picture of a Flying Doctor station, a station radio from the 1940s, which is actually sitting about 10 feet away from me in my garage, wrapped up in some protective covering at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's complete, absolutely complete. The inside of it is pristine.
It's not the pedal one, is it?
No, it's the one after the pedal radio. It used to run on 4 are those big ever-ready cells and the
Yep.
big cylindrical cells.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's sitting there at the moment, and so I do have a genuine second generation. I can't think of his name. Who was the
Traeger.
Traeger? Alfred Traeger. Yeah, so I've got a Traeger radio. It's a 3-valve configuration with Phillips valves in it.
Yep.
Which
I think
is
they're a super het receiver. No, sorry, regenerative receiver in those, I think.
they were, yeah. And so if you're interested, have a look on qrz.com. At the bottom of the page is a picture of it. It's in quite good shape.
If you get it on air one day, it'll be AM.
It would be nice.
All right, guys, it's getting late for you over there. I
Yep.
appreciate that. Appreciate your time.
Kim, thank you very, very much for responding to my request. And it's been absolutely appreciated. I knew pretty much nothing of, I knew there were some HF travel support activities happening out there. I didn't know much about it at all, and it's been very, very enlightening. And thank you for your thoughts on antennas too, because a lot of people here have been sort of pursuing better antenna solutions, and I, for one, am quite happy you endorse loops, because that makes me feel kind of happy.
Yeah.
So,
all right, guys, thanks a lot.
So thank you from the club, and thank you very much.
Thank you.